Beneath the ruins of war and silence of forgotten forests, terrifying secrets have waited untouched for over 70 years. From underground Nazi labs and death trains sealed in mountains to mass graves built for experiments no one was meant to survive, these are not just lost relics. They are echoes of horror buried in darkness. What you're about to see isn't just history, it's the side of World War II they never wanted you to uncover. Proceed with caution, this is not for the faint of heart. In the chilling waters of the Baltic Sea, a diving expedition in 2015 led to a discovery that would leave both historians and scientists shaken. The team, made up of Swedish and German marine archaeologists, had initially been searching for sunken cargo ships, remnants of forgotten wartime logistics. What they found instead was a long-lost Nazi U-boat, remarkably well-preserved at nearly 240 feet below the surface. The submarine, later identified as U-479, had vanished in late 1944 with no distress call or trace. It was presumed lost to enemy depth charges or mechanical failure. When the dive cameras captured its form emerging from the silt-covered seabed, it was intact, eerily untouched by time. Barnacles clung to its outer hull, but the structure remained solid, the metal only lightly scarred by rust. The periscope was still extended. The hatches remained sealed. The dive team managed to enter through the forward torpedo room. What they discovered was nothing short of haunting. Inside, the air was thick and motionless. Mummified bodies of the crew lay slumped over control panels, one still clutching a rusted wrench. Another was sitting in the communications chair, his jaw permanently open in what looked like a final scream. There were no signs of flooding. No internal explosions. Whatever had happened had done so silently and fast. Strangely, one of the rear compartments had been welded shut from the inside. Its door was covered in deep scratch marks, as though something, or someone, had desperately tried to claw their way out. The welds were crude, hurried, unlike standard engineering practice. After several dives and cautious attempts to cut through the steel without compromising the structure, the team opened the sealed chamber. What they found inside shifted the story from tragic to terrifying. Stacked neatly were steel crates marked only with serial codes and a faded swastika. Each crate contained tightly sealed canisters of a substance that raised immediate alarms. Chemical analysis revealed traces of taboon, a nerve agent developed by the Nazis but rarely deployed due to its volatility. These were not merely containers, they were delivery systems, ready to be launched or detonated. The implication was dark. U-479 had been repurposed for a suicide mission involving chemical warfare, likely targeting Allied harbors or cities in the closing desperation of the war. Why the mission was aborted, why the submarine never surfaced again, remained a mystery. But investigators found a charred and partially melted journal belonging to the first officer. Some entries were legible, one in particular chilling to the bone. "Captain ordered us to seal the aft room," he said. The agent leaked. Seifert collapsed after checking the seals. The smell, sweet, almost like almonds. "Captain is coughing blood now. We cannot surface. We cannot return. I fear we are all already dead." Another entry, barely legible, added, "Voices. At night, from the sealed room. I thought it was gas sickness, but Anders heard them too. Whispers. Begging. Screaming. Captain ordered radio silence. We're ghosts now." The submarine, now a crypt and a tomb, was left untouched after documentation. Authorities declared it a hazardous site, too dangerous to extract due to the remaining nerve agent. Divers were banned from approaching within 200 meters. However, rumors began to circulate. Some locals claimed the diving crew had withheld footage. An anonymous source alleged that one of the canisters had gone missing between dives and that Swedish military officials quietly handled its disappearance. Theories ranged from black market sales to secret weapons programs. But the most disturbing reports came from the dive team itself. In a documentary filmed a year after the discovery, 2 members mentioned experiencing vivid nightmares and hallucinations after returning from the dives. One diver, who refused to return for follow-up missions, claimed he saw a man in uniform standing inside the sealed chamber before they cut it open, though sonar had shown it empty. Another diver quit entirely, saying only, "That place wasn't just a wreck. It was a tomb that wanted to stay closed." Today, U-479 lies in silence, a grave marker beneath the waves. Historians continue to speculate on its final hours, whether the crew knowingly entombed themselves to protect the world from the deadly cargo, or whether something darker occurred aboard that submarine in its final hours. The mystery remains buried under the icy waters of the Baltic, a chilling reminder that some parts of the war still refuse to rest. In the remote wilderness of Canada's Yukon Territory, a vast and frozen land where silence reigns and snow blankets the mountains year-round, a group of summer hikers in 1998 made a discovery that seemed straight out of a forgotten war novel. After an unusually warm month caused glacial ice to recede higher than usual, they stumbled upon a twisted metal shape emerging from the ice, a World War II-era American B-24 bomber, long believed lost, but now eerily preserved. The bomber, later identified as Eagle's Cry, had disappeared in February 1943 while en route from Montana to Fairbanks as part of the Lend-Lease aid route to the Soviet Union. For over 5 decades, the U.S. military listed it as missing due to weather. No wreckage was ever found. But there it was, partially submerged in the melting ice, its wings still intact, the star insignia faint but visible on the fuselage. Canadian authorities quickly cordoned off the site and called in military historians, aviation experts, and forensic specialists. As the ice continued to thaw, more of the bomber was revealed. When the cockpit was accessed, the bodies of the pilot and co-pilot were discovered still strapped in their seats, their faces preserved by decades of freezing temperatures. They looked like they'd been frozen just days ago. The rest of the crew, 7 in total, were later found in various positions within the aircraft. There were no signs of a struggle, no bullet holes, no fire damage. Everything looked normal. Almost too normal. It wasn't just the pristine preservation that disturbed investigators, it was what they found among the personal belongings. Tucked inside a canvas duffel bag belonging to the bombardier, hidden beneath letters and a flight log, was a worn leather notebook with pages filled in a mix of English and Russian. The notebook seemed to belong to Lieutenant Mark DeWitt, the navigator. But what caught everyone's attention were the pages describing a secret mission. It stated that the bomber was not simply delivering supplies but carrying classified documents and a diplomatic emissary, a Soviet official named Mikhail Zubarev, who was to be secretly flown into Alaska for an unsanctioned meeting with American and British intelligence. According to DeWitt's notes, the meeting was to discuss post-war territory planning, a concept that went far beyond the war's then-current goals. Zubarev reportedly carried proposals from Stalin that involved splitting parts of Eastern Europe and the Arctic regions in exchange for neutrality zones. This would have been explosive information, evidence of Cold War tensions brewing even before the official end of World War II. But here's where the story twists further. Mikhail Zubarev was never listed on any American or Soviet aircraft manifest. In fact, Soviet archives later released in the early 2000s made no mention of such a man ever existing. Yet, a skeletal body was found in the tail section, dressed in an unusual hybrid of Soviet military and civilian clothing, with documents in Russian hidden inside a belt pouch. Fingerprints lifted from the corpse did not match any U.S. military personnel, confirming the body was not American. The cause of death? Blunt trauma to the back of the head, and 2 missing fingers. Strangely, Lieutenant DeWitt's body was never found. The notebook entries became more erratic in their final pages. DeWitt wrote about growing distrust among the crew. He mentioned arguments between the pilot and the passenger, references to radio silence being forced, and cryptic phrases like, "He's not who he says he is," and "The others are scared, but they won't speak." The last entry read, "Tonight, I'll do what must be done. If this gets out, if the papers fall into the wrong hands, we all lose. I'm sorry, brother. If I don't survive this, tell them the eagle never cried, it was silenced." The implications were staggering. Had the crew turned on each other? Was DeWitt's disappearance the result of an escape, or was his body lost elsewhere in the icy terrain? Did the U.S. and Soviet governments collude to bury the incident entirely? In the years following the discovery, both American and Russian officials showed unusual interest in the site. requests were made to restrict public access. The documents recovered were never released to the public, and several key pieces of evidence were quietly transferred to military research labs in the U.S. Conspiracy theories exploded online. Some claimed the bomber had been shot down by friendly fire to prevent the meeting from happening. Others believed the emissary had tried to defect and was murdered by the crew. And some suggested a supernatural element, pointing to strange electromagnetic readings recorded near the wreckage and unexplained compass failures in the area. Even today, hikers who pass through the region report odd sensations of being watched, of time feeling off. A few claim they've seen ghostly lights in the sky above the old wreck site. One man swore he saw the faint outline of a bomber flying silently overhead, vanishing into the mist. Despite it all, Eagle's Cry remains largely untouched, now a protected war grave. A simple marker stands at the foot of the glacier trail, reading, "Here rests the unknown, found, but never fully explained." Deep in the shadowy Owl Mountains of southwestern Poland lies a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved into stone, an enigmatic Nazi megastructure known as Project Riese. Long shrouded in mystery, the site was originally intended to be a series of underground bunkers and facilities built by the Third Reich in the final years of World War II. Some believed it was to serve as Hitler's final command post, while others speculated it was meant to house secret weapons projects, or worse, an escape route for Nazi elites. Though construction was abandoned in early 1945, the massive underground complex still draws explorers, conspiracy theorists, and historians. But it wasn't until 2002 that one of its darkest secrets was unearthed, quite literally, when a local amateur historian, Tomasz Wojcik, led a team to investigate a sealed section of the tunnel system near the village of Wallum. With official excavation permits denied for decades due to safety concerns and military restrictions, Wojcik's team operated discreetly. Using ground-penetrating radar, they identified a chamber hidden behind a false wall. The entrance had been bricked up and reinforced with steel bars, a clear indication that someone had gone to great lengths to keep whatever lay beyond hidden. After weeks of chipping through the stone and dodging cave-ins, the team finally broke through. What greeted them was a dry, silent chamber filled with the unmistakable stench of old death. Human remains, dozens of them, lay piled against the far wall, their skeletal forms tangled and brittle. Some still wore fragments of prison uniforms, others were in civilian clothing. No identification tags. No documents. Just bones. Many of the skulls bore signs of blunt force trauma. Some had limbs shackled together with rusted chains. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. In the center of the room was a surgical table. Around it, shelves containing jars filled with preserved organs, discolored by time but unmistakable in form, hearts, brains, eyes. Nearby, surgical instruments sat in neat trays, bone saws, scalpels, syringes. An old, rusting spotlight hung overhead, its broken bulb frozen in time. Along one wall, crude diagrams had been painted in black ink. They showed human anatomy, but altered, extra limbs, strange symbols marked on skulls, and annotations in a mix of German and Latin. The chamber was not a shelter. It was a lab. Documents found in a sealed metal box revealed references to Testgruppe 13, a previously unknown SS medical division. These files, half-burned and water-stained, detailed experiments conducted on prisoners, primarily Poles, Russians, and Czechs. The experiments ranged from hypothermia testing to high-altitude simulations. But one series stood out, Genetic Rye K, Genetic Series K. This series seemed to be focused on identifying superior traits among the Slavic population, an idea that flew in the face of Nazi ideology. The notes mentioned terms like epigenetic mutability, sensory control enhancement, and chillingly, viable hybrid specimens. Among the papers was a list of code names. Most were simple alphanumeric tags, but a few had been underlined in red. One name appeared repeatedly, Patient K, 17. No photo, no background, only cryptic notes such as resists sedation, enhanced bone density, and responsive to environmental stress at 400% baseline. Some believe Patient K, 17 may have been a child. The discovery was immediately sealed off by Polish military authorities after Wojciech contacted national media. He was briefly detained and released without charge, but since then, he has refused all interviews. Members of his team claim they were warned to stay silent and surrender any materials collected from the site. Only a handful of photographs from the chamber leaked to the public. One, showing a small skeletal body restrained by leather straps on the surgical table, ignited global outcry. Some dismissed it as propaganda or a hoax. But for those who had seen it firsthand, the weight of history felt undeniable. In 2006, a confidential whistleblower within the Polish archives anonymously posted a partial translation of one of the test Group 13 files. It included the following passage. Subject K, 17 has displayed resistance to neurotoxic agents and is capable of tolerating extreme pain. Experiments 24 to 31 indicate possible accelerated healing. Subject exhibits intermittent seizures followed by moments of lucidity in which the subject speaks unknown dialects. Further study is required before transfer to Wielsburg. Wielsburg, an SS occult stronghold and the supposed center of Heinrich Himmler's mystic research. This connection added fuel to the theory that the experiments were not merely medical, but occult in nature. Historians had long speculated about the Nazi obsession with ancient myths and genetic purity. Could these experiments have been an attempt to create a mythic soldier? To this day, no one knows exactly how many people died in that hidden lab. No records match the discovered remains, and no official death certificates exist. The area around the chamber has since been permanently sealed with concrete and labeled a hazardous stability zone. Some locals claim that even now, strange things happen near the site. Electronic devices malfunction, compasses spin erratically, and animals refuse to approach the hillside. One former tunnel worker swore he heard voices while operating machinery near the sealed section. Whispers, he said. Always whispers. The forgotten mass grave of Riese remains a scar on a landscape already stained by war. It's a reminder that beneath the surface of even the most well-documented conflicts lie hidden crimes, secrets buried by stone and silence, and horrors that were never meant to be remembered. In the rugged snow-draped peaks of the Italian Alps, not far from the town of Bolzano, a local construction crew made a discovery in 2013 that would forever alter the quiet history of the region. While surveying an old and used railway tunnel slated for conversion into a tourism path, they came across a rockfall that appeared unnatural. The rubble had clearly been deliberately placed, as if to hide something beneath it. Behind the debris, sealed by warped iron doors, was a forgotten train entombed for nearly 70 years. The tunnel, now known as Passaggio della Morte, Passage of Death, had become the subject of eerie folklore among locals. Whispers of a ghost train that had disappeared during the war had persisted in the surrounding villages for generations. The truth, as it turned out, was far more chilling than any legend. The train inside the tunnel was a heavily armored German military transport, later identified through faded manifest records as Transport Number 77B, scheduled to depart from Milan in early April 1945. It had never reached its destination. Forgotten in the final chaotic weeks of the war, it had vanished without a trace, until now. When the doors were finally pried open, the stale air that spilled out was heavy with rot and rust. The train, sealed tight and untouched, was eerily preserved. The locomotives and rail cars stood in a single file line, like a funeral procession halted in time. But what lay inside the cars turned the site from a historical curiosity into something far darker. In the first carriage, investigators found rows of wooden crates stacked to the ceiling. Inside were paintings, sculptures, and religious artifacts, many of which were immediately recognized as stolen from churches and private Jewish collections in Austria and northern Italy. Priceless works, all assumed lost or destroyed during the war. Some bore labels written in meticulous German script, Reichssicher, Persönlich für Himmler. Secure for the Reich, personal for Himmler. The second and third cars were filled with gold. Coins, jewelry, and ingots packed into military crates, some marked with a swastika and SS lightning bolts. One crate alone held enough gold to fund an army division. It was a mobile treasury, and its destination remains unknown to this day. But it was the final 4 cars that stunned the world. They were filled with bodies. Hundreds of them, stacked, shackled, and in some cases, shot. Allied prisoners of war, Italian partisans, and civilians. Men, women, even children. Forensic analysis revealed they had died from a combination of starvation, hypothermia, and execution. Some still had blindfolds on, their mouths open in silent screams. One carriage had the remnants of a gas canister, likely Zyklon B. Why? Why transport the bodies? The answer came from a journal found on the body of an SS officer near the engineer's cabin. Water-damaged and incomplete, it told a horrifying story. We are to cleanse the traitors. We cannot allow them to reach the Allies. The gold is for the Reich's return. The rest are witnesses. Himmler gave direct orders. No one is to survive. Burn the train if cornered. The implication was unmistakable. This train wasn't just transporting treasure. It was a mobile execution chamber, tasked with eliminating prisoners and looted evidence before the Allied advance. But something had gone wrong. Witness marks on the tunnel walls and the collapsed ceiling indicated a controlled demolition, likely executed by retreating German soldiers to entomb the train forever. Strangely, no signs of struggle were found inside the conductor's cabin. The brakes had been locked, the engines disabled. It was as if those operating the train had quietly accepted its fate, or perhaps intended from the beginning to die with it. One car, however, bore markings inconsistent with Nazi transport standards. Scrawled in chalk in Italian were the words, "Non dimenticare mai," never forget. Further examination of the site yielded even stranger findings. Tunnels branching from the main railway line had been freshly carved before the demolition, suggesting the train may have been a decoy or a part of something larger. Several crates from the last car were missing. Tracks were found leading away from the site into a sealed shaft, which collapsed during excavation. The gold and art were only part of the cargo. Rumors spread fast. Some believed the missing crates contained Nazi scientific data, weapons prototypes, or even human experiment records. Others whispered about a secret SS cult that had tried to smuggle occult artifacts into South America. After all, among the items recovered was a strange object that baffled historians, a bronze idol resembling an ancient Mesopotamian god, wrapped in Nazi flag cloth. Even more bizarre was the figure carved into one of the train car walls, a man with 2 faces, one weeping, one laughing, wearing a crown of iron. No known symbol of the Nazi regime matched it. The Italian government, in coordination with Germany and international war crimes organizations, launched a classified investigation. Art pieces were returned where possible, while the gold's fate remains a subject of diplomatic secrecy. Survivors' families demanded full transparency, but little more has been publicly released. To this day, locals report hearing strange sounds from the sealed tunnel. Moans. Screeches. Some say they see lights flickering in the night near the blocked entrance, like lanterns moving through the mountains. One old shepherd claimed to have seen a train moving without tracks, bleeding smoke into the moonlight before disappearing into the forest. The site, now under military watch, remains closed to the public. But for those who know the truth, the legend of Transport No. 77B, the SS blood train, lives on as one of the most chilling and deliberately hidden atrocities of World War II. Not just a mass grave on wheels, but a dark reminder of how far some would go to silence the past. In the dense, mist-wrapped forests of eastern Germany, near the Czech border, lies the ruins of what was once a minor Wehrmacht outpost known as Kammerwald Station 12. Long considered unremarkable, the site was largely forgotten by historians, eclipsed by more notorious Nazi strongholds. It wasn't until 2017, during forest clearing operations for a new logging road, that the forgotten past clawed its way back to the surface. Beneath a cracked concrete foundation, work crews discovered a sealed steel hatch. It was buried under decades of soil and roots, rusted shut and covered in moss. Curious, a local survey team broke it open, revealing a spiral staircase descending deep into the earth. The air that wafted up was cold and stale, untouched by sunlight since 1945. Officials were notified, and a small historical investigation unit was dispatched. What they found in the chamber below would disturb even the most seasoned war historians. The hatch led to an underground testing facility, roughly the size of a football field, spread across multiple levels. Power cables, now long dead, hung from the ceiling like spiderwebs. Metal doors lined the hallway walls, many bearing cryptic designations: Z4, Red, G17, Nacht class. Inside the rooms were remnants of something far more sinister than weapons or war strategy. The first chamber was a dormitory, with decaying cots and collapsed bunk beds. On the walls, strange markings had been scratched into the plaster, symbols resembling Norse runes and alchemical glyphs. Some were etched in blood. On a table lay a water-damaged logbook, kept by an officer named Oberstleutnant Erich Voller. His records were erratic, frenzied. At first, they were routine, a list of incoming materials, supply checks, personnel schedules. But over time, the entries grew strange. He began referring to certain inmates as subjects, not prisoners. He described successful awakenings, temporary possession events, and even an entity referred to only as Der Flusterer, the Whisperer. Another room, sealed behind reinforced steel, was labeled simply Einwegkammer, one-way chamber. Inside, a large concrete cube stood in the center, with a single chair bolted to the floor. The walls bore thousands of tiny scratch marks, claw-like, frantic. Above the chair, a spotlight was angled downward, connected to a now inert electrical panel with settings labeled Phase Rot, Phase Grau, and Phase Schwarz. Near the cube, old film reels were discovered, most too damaged to restore. But one, partially salvageable, showed blurred footage of a man seated in the cube. He appeared calm, until the lights dimmed. The footage then became distorted, showing brief flashes of the man convulsing violently. In one frame, his head is tilted unnaturally far back. In the final frame before the film ends, two glowing eyes can be seen reflected in the darkened window, though the room was otherwise empty. But it was the lowest level, accessed via a rusted elevator shaft, that revealed the bunker's true horror. There, in a circular chamber lined with lead panels, researchers found a mass grave. Over 200 skeletal remains were packed into a pit at the center of the room. Many had broken limbs, shattered skulls, and signs of violent trauma. But some had bizarre deformities, elongated fingers, extra joints, and in one case, a spine that appeared to have been surgically segmented and rearranged. Near the pit, an altar-like structure stood, built from iron and carved stone. It bore symbols not associated with any known Nazi group, but rather resembled ancient Babylonian script. One panel was etched with an ominous phrase in Latin: Aperiatur porta, redibit ex umbra. Let the gate be opened. It shall return from the shadow. Among the artifacts recovered was a sealed container marked with SS insignia. Inside were hundreds of handwritten pages, ritualistic instructions, invocations, descriptions of mental alignments required for spiritual fusion. The document, labeled Codex Nachtgeist, appeared to be a hybrid of occult theology and pseudoscience. It was signed only with the initials HKS, believed by some to be Heinrich Kurt Stadler, a known SS mystic who vanished in 1945. Eyewitnesses from the original excavation team have since come forward anonymously. One claimed they heard low voices whispering in the darkness of the chamber, even after power and comms had been cut. Another became violently ill after touching one of the altar stones and was hospitalized with seizures and visual hallucinations for weeks. Since the discovery, the German government has restricted access to Kammerwald Station 12. The site is officially declared geologically unstable, though those who have tried to sneak in report motion detectors, armed guards, and even military drones. In 2019, a classified memo was leaked online by a whistleblower within the Bundeswehr. It contained notes from a closed-door scientific review of the site. One line from the memo stood out. We believe Station 12 was not conducting war experiments in the conventional sense. Their goal was transcendence, creating a vessel, a host. They were not trying to win the war. They were trying to survive it, in another form. Since then, interest in the site has reached cult-like levels. Some claim the bunker is still active, that strange energies pulse from beneath the forest. A few local villagers insist that once every year, during the coldest winter night, they hear screams echoing through the trees, and once saw a flickering blue light radiating from the sealed hatch. Cammerwald remains untouched. And perhaps that's for the best. Some doors were never meant to be opened. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?